if we don't do our part now, right, to reduce our emissions and to keep global warming within safe limits, then future generations, that means our kids and nephews and friends' kids and so on, and their kids will live in a very hostile world, right, with freak storms, food shortages, extreme hot and cold weather, and new diseases.
What's up, Aventis fam? Welcome to the podcast series Aventis Knows. You are now listening to the 5th episode of this sustainability season, Aventis Knows. This show is brought to you by Aventis Learning Group, and I'm your host, Sing Han. If you're an individual who's trying to find your way around the corporate ocean or trying to hashtag up your game with your career, this is where you should be. So the podcast topic we have today is the worldwide emergency, decarbonisation. We'll be taking a quick dive into zero carbon, and we will be looking into ways how we can achieve a decarbonized economy. Now, net zero has rapidly moved to the mainstream. In 2019, net zero pledges covered just 16% of the global economy. However, by 2021, nearly 70% of the global economy had pledged to commit to net zero by the year 2050. And despite this explosive growth, the definition of net zero itself, as well as the path to get there, has been interpreted in different and often inconsistent ways. In the absence of a common definition, targets can differ in terms of the sources of emissions included, the depth and the speed at which emissions are reduced, and the time frame of the target. This has also fueled confusion and accusations of greenwashing. So to answer our questions, let's bring in our speaker for today, Mun Wei, to share more on the topic. Hi Mun Wei, welcome to the show.
Yeah, morning, Jinghan. Yeah, good to meet you.
So let's start out with an introduction first. Can you first share with our listeners a little more about you and your expertise?
Sure. Okay, I am in the space of sustainability. So I work with corporate clients, and I consult for them. I do training, and I also do some writing for my clients. So but I'm pretty much a practitioner. So before I set up my own business, SustainableSG, I worked at the Sentosa Development Corporation for almost 10 years as the head of the corporate planning team. And one of my responsibilities was sustainability. So then I got very interested in it. And after kind of working at Sentosa for almost 10 years, I decided to set up my own business, SustainableSG. So that's the name of my business, to provide consulting and training services in sustainability, risk, and strategy. Yeah, so that's pretty much a little bit about myself. And I would say that just to add that sustainability is a very exciting area. Is something we need to do, and it's also fast evolving. There are a lot of new things to learn, and my areas of interest and expertise will include strategy, carbon management, climate action, recycling, and the circular economy, as well as working with clients on risk assessment. Yeah.
Yes, I agree that sustainability is also a rising trend right now. So today we are going to talk about the topic on zero carbon. So for starters, can you share with us what is decarbonization and why is it so important and so commonly talked about?
Okay, yeah. So decarbonization is really about reducing the emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, right? So they are okay, and maybe to little bit of kind of science 101. So because these 4 categories of what they call the greenhouse gases. So what happens is that they are produced through various economic and industrial activities, say such as when we drive a car. So because what comes out from the tailpipe is quite a bit of carbon dioxide, right, and other gases. And what these greenhouse gases do is that they create warming in the atmosphere. Okay, so then what are the 4 types of greenhouse gases? So as I said, there's CO2, there is methane, NH4, there's nitrous oxide, and then there's this category of gases called the fluorinated gases, right? So these are mainly man-made compounds. So these 4 types of gases essentially they cause global warming. Okay, and the Earth, because of all our economic activities, Earth has actually warmed about 1.1 degrees since about 1880, right? And then and currently we are pumping out about 40 billion tons of emissions annually, right? Okay, and then and if you look at, say, if you measure, let's say, the CO2 in the air, so and that's actually done in what we call parts per million. So that level has actually been steadily increasing from 300 plus decades ago and it now stands at 416 in December 2021. So it's a bit like a sauna, right? So if you pump out too much kind of gas into our surroundings, then it actually creates this extreme warming effect. Okay, and maybe just to add that 1.1 degrees of warming doesn't seem a lot, but it is. Okay, and that's because the Earth is actually in what I call very sensitive equilibrium, right? So and the warming actually creates a lot of extreme issues, say such as kind of very hot weather and very cold weather in different parts of the world. It affects crop production and even affects health and safety for outdoor workers, right? I mean, case in point is that actually the temperatures in Argentina and some parts of Western Australia, it hit 50 degrees centigrade last week. Okay, and then just one more point, which is that so the Earth is warming, and then we need to do something about it. And then the research has shown that a safe threshold is really to limit global warming to 1.5 Celsius by 2100. Okay, so as I said, right, we've already warmed 1.1 degrees. So our headroom is only about 0.4 Celsius. Okay, and in order to do that, we have to halve global emissions by 2030 and hit net zero. So that means we basically don't produce any man-made carbon dioxide by 2050. Okay, so but this is a big challenge because based on the latest research, we are on track to hit this 1.5 Celsius limit by 2030. So in about maybe 10 to 15 years time. Yeah, so it's really a big and urgent challenge for all of us.
So you mentioned that we will need to hit targets by 2030 and 2050s, and you also mentioned the challenges. Could you tell us a bit more about what are some of the challenges that we will face in reducing carbon emissions?
Okay, I would say that the biggest challenge is really taking a hard look at the way taking a hard look at our economic activities and our lifestyles. Right, so because the biggest contributor to emissions, to the production of greenhouse gases is the burning of fossil fuels. Okay, so the 3 common fossil fuels are coal, petroleum, and natural gas, right? And why they're called fossil fuels is because they actually form over millions of years from decomposition of plants and animals. Okay, and if you think about it, the world is highly dependent on fossil fuels, right? So we pump petrol to power our cars and trucks, right? And then in Singapore, we burn our power generators. They burn natural gas to generate electricity for all of us. At homes, we use natural gas for cooking. And we even use charcoal when we do barbecue, right? And charcoal is actually is also technically a fossil fuel as well. So essentially, it's very hard for us to switch off entirely from fossil fuels, right? Because a lot of our economic growth and prosperity has been built on fossil fuels over the last 100 to 150 years. Yeah, so that's why we need to, to use a term, we need to pivot away from this reliance on fossil fuels, and it'll take us a while to do that.
So what can we as a society do to get zero carbon, and what is actually needed?
Yeah, so the transition from a very fossil fuel dependent and emission intensive society to one that is there's less, in a way, carbon less, right? No, it can't be, it's very difficult to be entirely carbon free. So the effort will take time, right? So easily years, if not decades. And it's actually a massive effort that involves everybody, right? From governments to big companies, to small companies, to communities, as well as people like you and I. Okay, and it has to be a multi-step effort, right? So in the sense that we have to build awareness so that people understand the science of climate change better, and then they can also, in a way, join the dots between what's happening in terms of climate change and what are their day-to-day decisions, right, and actions. Okay, and what's very important is that we must be prepared to put in effort, right? In the sense that we have to make sensible choices, and we have to make some sacrifices too, right? Say, for instance, we have to consume less because it's simply not sustainable to continue living our current lifestyles. So let me give you a factoid, right? Which is that the average carbon footprint of a typical Singaporean. So what is a carbon footprint? It's really the summation of the emissions associated with all our day-to-day activities. Okay, so on average, every Singaporean generates about 9 to 10 tons of carbon dioxide every year. Okay, 9 to 10 tons. And what we need, what the science tells us in terms of a sustainable level of emissions will be something in the region of 3 tons per year, right? So essentially we have to go from 9 to 10 tons per person to 3 tons, right? So essentially we are shaving off about 66% of our current emissions. Yeah, so that's quite a dramatic and transformational change and it's a path that we all need to embark on. Yeah.
Okay, so knowing the importance of decarbonization now, I'm sure that the government has also taken some measures to strategize for the future. So can you share with us what has the Singapore government done so far?
Yes, this is not a new issue in that governments have been aware of the impact and dangers of climate change for the last 3 decades at the least. And the Singapore government has been gradually building up their knowledge and efforts, right? And what was really good was that in early last year, in February last year, the government launched the Singapore Green Plan 2030. So this was really the official quote is to rally bold and collective action to tackle climate change. And I must say that it's a very, very comprehensive plan. Right, so it talks about the need to have cleaner vehicles. So essentially, we have to move from cars, trucks, and buses that run on petrol and diesel. We have to move to electric vehicles, right? So, and because electric vehicles they emit less emissions compared to the older vehicles. Okay, there's also a very strong emphasis on implementing renewable energy such as solar, right? And then there's also a part of the strategy also has to dealing with having more green buildings that use less energy, and as well as promoting public transport. So it's a very comprehensive and holistic plan, right? And then over and above that, the government also has this big picture goal of peaking our country's emissions by 2030 and progressively half this from, okay, this is a big number, 65 megatons of CO2. So that's our peak in 2030, and to halve it to about 30 megatons by 2050, and eventually reaching net zero by second half of the century. Yeah, so we have a plan and with a target. So I guess what we all need to do collectively is to rally behind the plan, and each one of us can do our part in supporting that national strategy.
So now in organizational context, how can companies set a definitive timeline to reach their respective goals? Like, for example, are there any strategies to incorporate?
Yes, I would say that the first thing that companies need to do is to measure what their current emissions are. Yeah, so because this is something that not all companies are currently doing, right? So I would say that the bigger companies are on the task already, but a lot of the smaller companies that I meet, that I talk to in the course of my work, they are not ready yet, right? So because in a way you need to know what your baseline is, right? So they need to start by measuring their corporate emissions, and then what they need to do after that, once they have their baseline, then they can look at putting in place a strategy and a timeline to reduce their emissions, right? They can have a long-term goal that's aligned with what the climate science is saying. And just as importantly, it's also to have intermediate milestones. Say every year they need to track how well they are doing. And and then they can make certain adjustments so that eventually they can reach that long-term goal.
So what are some of the ways for companies to benchmark their performances as well?
Yeah, I would say there are, broadly speaking, two approaches. So one is, of course, to do some comparisons with their peers, right? So again, when I work with companies, I always encourage them to do that. And sometimes, of course, as a consultant, I will assist my clients to do that in terms of identifying who are some of their competitors, who are some of their partners, and to look at what their partners and competitors are doing, right, in terms of the strategy, the carbon strategy, the implementation, how they are reducing their emissions, and how they go about reporting it. Yeah, so it's to do that peer benchmarking. The other thing that companies need to do is also to look at to follow some of the international standards. Like case in point is that there are two sets of international standards on carbon management. So one is by the ISO. So ISO is the International Standards Organization. So they have this, what they call the 14064 set of standards. Okay, so that's one standard to follow. Then the other set of standards to follow will be what they call the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, the GHG protocol, right? So this is actually a set of standards that are backed by two major non-government organizations. And the GHG protocol is a very popular and widely accepted standard. And if you go to their official website, so they provide a lot of, they provide very comprehensive resources, and they're all free of charge to help companies start on their decarbonization journey.
So how can sustainability reporting or disclosures play a part in reaching these carbon neutral targets?
Reporting and disclosure are really about accountability to your stakeholders, right? Like case in point is that for the SGX listed companies, right, they all have to issue a sustainability report every year. And in fact, on 15 December 2021, so about a month ago, the Stock Exchange of Singapore announced that all the listed companies, they must provide climate reporting on what they call a comply or explain basis, starting with effect for their financial year, starting 1 Jan 2022, right? So in other words, for the locally listed companies, is compulsory for them to do reporting, right? I must also add that perhaps one very important consideration is really to look at carbon management as an entire value chain, right? So, and really you have to start with the strategy, then the policy, implementation, tracking, and then reporting. Okay, so essentially reporting is like the anchor man or anchor woman of a relay race, right? So, and again, I always advise my companies that if you do the upfront things well, that means if you have a good strategy, you have a comprehensive strategy in place, you have the programs, you have resources to run things, then the reporting part is easy in that you would have a lot of accomplishments and content to report on, right? So then after the reporting, I think it's also very important to have a review stage, right? To perhaps have an annual stock take of your progress, and then that creates a feedback loop, right? So in that, then your assessment can be internal, external, would then influence your strategy for the next year and beyond.
So what are the consequences of not taking urgent actions towards sustainability?
Yeah, okay, I will look at this at two levels. So one is that is at the company level and at the society level, right? So let's say for the companies, there are many good reasons why they need to take urgent action. So one, of course, there'll be more compliance and reporting requirements and regulations. Like what I mentioned earlier. Like also another example I want to give is that a lot of the large emission emitters in Singapore, they currently have to pay a carbon tax. Yeah, so that's why it's also in their interest, right, to reduce the emissions, their corporate emissions, so that they pay less carbon tax. Okay, and then also just to add that from the company's perspective, kind of having a sustainability plan and particularly a carbon management strategy also helps you to manage your risk and improve your organizational resilience, right? So that's at the company level. And I think I must also emphasize that really at the societal level is climate action is really what I call a transgenerational and moral issue, in that if we don't do our part now, right, to reduce our emissions and to keep global warming within safe limits, then future generations, that means our kids and nephews and friends' kids and so on, and their kids will live in a very hostile world, right, with freak storms, food shortages, extreme hot and cold weather, and new diseases, right? I mean, if you think about it, I mean, we are already seeing all those symptoms, if I may say, right, of this chronic climate change illness, in that even when we travel, right? So like whenever my friends and I, we discuss our pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID travel plans, then we are increasingly very mindful of where to go, and we want to avoid places with extreme weather, right? So because that could disrupt our holiday. Yeah, so it's something that's affecting all of us. So we need to do something now so that we can safeguard and hand over a habitable world for next generations.
So now, before we end our first session on this podcast topic, could you leave us a take-home message for our listeners or any golden rules that encourage you to keep going?
Yeah, I would say very important is really to look out the window and we can all see that Singapore has prospered, right? So for those of us who are older, then we can certainly see how Singapore has developed, right? And it's only a few years ago we had our SG50 holiday, right? And my take is that what we do in the realm of sustainability will make sure that Singapore continues to prosper in SG100 and beyond. So it's good for all of us, it's good for future generations. So let's get going on sustainability.
Hi Aventis fam, from this session, we now know that a sustainability strategy with prioritized initiatives can help companies operating in relevant sectors to accelerate their journey to net zero. Sectors leaders are also leveraging technology innovations like IoT, AI, blockchain, and cloud to reach sustainability milestones faster, and they drive real breakthroughs for their businesses and industries. With that, thank you for tuning to this episode of Aventis News Season 5. And stay tuned to our next episode next week to continue to find out more about sustainability and a net zero economy. And if you do have any questions regarding this topic of sustainability or decarbonization or about net zero, do drop down your questions in the comment section below or drop us a DM. We are available on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Telegram, as well as on Spotify. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to us for more podcast episodes, and we will see you soon. Bye!